One day while exploring, you may get attacked by a whole mess of mole rats. That's not unusual, mole rats are all over the place, but the difference here is that these mole rats had just killed someone. Nearby, we find the corpse of a man in combat armor named Hadrian. He's stuck in a life ring, and on his body are two notes. The first is the Jamaica Plain Flyer. The Treasure of Jamaica Plain, October 17th through the 23rd, 2077. Come see the fabulous treasures of Jamaica Plain. This stunning exhibit will be on display for 1 week only before these priceless items are sealed away, never to be seen again. Bring the entire family to this once-in-a-lifetime event. The other note on his corpse is Hadrian's invitation.
Hadrian, Carl, got a job you might be interested in. You know about Jamaica Plain, right? Place where they hid all that treasure before the war. No one's ever found it, account of all the ghouls. Sal's putting together a raid team. We still need a sniper, even split of the loot. You up for it? If so, you know where to find me.
Well, it's clear that Hadrian never met Carl and never joined Sal's team. We can find these Jamaica Plain flyers in other places too. There's one inside the ruins of the Boston airport. In the terminal on a magazine rack we can find a fishing tournament ad. This takes us to Lake Quannapowitt. I already did a video on that. And a flyer for the treasures of Jamaica Plain. There's also one in the marketplace of Faneuil Hall. Heading downstairs we find a magazine rack where we find flyers advertising Easy City Downs. I did a video on that already. And also Jamaica Plain. So, a treasure at Jamaica Plain. According to the note, it was only going to be on display for 1 week, and then it was going to be sealed away, never to be seen again. This makes me think of a time capsule of sorts. Let's head to Jamaica Plain to see if we can find it. As soon as we arrive, we get attacked by feral ghouls.
Don't run. That's good.
We were warned of this on the holotape. They predict the treasure may still be there because it's been guarded all of these years by feral ghouls. Near the road that leads into Jamaica Plain, we find a large billboard that still has an advertisement promoting the treasures of Jamaica Plain. This must have been a big local event. The town was going out of their way to promote it. I wonder why. The town is in utter shambles. Every house is absolutely destroyed, and we find skeletons littering the ground, propped up at dinner tables, stuffed under cars. There are skeletons around every corner. In one of the houses, we see a whole bunch of dead feral ghouls and blood on the ground. Well, this is strange. We haven't been here yet. How did all of these ghouls die? Heading upstairs, we see more dead feral ghouls, and they lead us to a broken room with two corpses stacked in the corner. These two corpses are headless. Presumably the ghouls have eaten their heads, but in previous games I've played, their heads still existed, and they were blue, telling me that these people had been recently killed. Their bodies were just in the beginning stages of decomposition. These are the corpses of Tanya and Ken Standish. On Tanya's corpse, we find a Jamaica Plain flyer and a torn journal page. The Jamaica Plain flyer is identical to the one we found on Hadrian's corpse. This leads me to believe that they may have been part of the same party, possibly part of that treasure hunting party that Carl was putting together. We can then read the torn journal page. It was written on October 6th. It's almost over. As soon as we get the treasure, I can finally do away with that damn woman and her leering looks at my Ken. Can't wait to wipe the smirk off that stupid face. Well, they were clearly after the Jamaica Plain's treasure. Ken and Tanya must be married. They share the same last name, and she's apparently really possessive over him. Who was the, quote, damn woman who was leering after her Ken? On Ken's corpse, we find the Jamaica Plain archives key and a holotape, Ken's invitation.
Hey, Ken, it's Carl. You two still looking for a score? I got a lead for you. You know Sal, ex-gunner? She's after the treasures of Jamaica Plain. Biggest haul in the Commonwealth if you can get past the ghouls. I know you and Tanya have the skills. This could be big. You in?
It's from our good friend Carl. So he sent a holotape invitation to both Hadrian and Ken and Tanya Standish. He again refers to Sal, but refers to her as a she, and mentions that she's a former gunner. Looks like Sal is going to be the leader of this ragtag band of treasure hunters, not Carl. Carl is just organizing them, getting them together. Now that we know Sal is a woman, Tanya's torn note makes a little bit more sense. Maybe Sal had eyes for her husband, Ken. Maybe that's what was making Tanya jealous. And maybe after she and Ken looted the treasure, she had plans to betray Sal and kill her. Back outside the house and continuing along the road, we find another trail of feral ghoul corpses. These again were not done by me. I wonder who killed them. Well, as we explore this scene, we can walk around some concrete barricades to find the decaying corpse of Carl Everett. Carl's head is still here in this one, and his face and hands are blue. His corpse has been here for a while. On his body, we find the Jamaica Plain Town Hall key, as well as Carl's log. The first entry on Carl's log is Jamaica Plain Raid Team. And here we get a list of everyone who was part of this raid team. Our suspicions are confirmed. Sal is the lead. She specializes in heavy weapons. And then we hear of a man named Luke Silverhand. He's a gearhead. He's good at tech and intel. We haven't found him yet. Then we find Ken and Tanya Standish, the two headless corpses we just explored. Ken was a scout, specializing in locks, traps, and stealth. Tanya was good at small arms and close quarters combat. Hadrian was a sniper, but Carl never got a response from him. We know why. He was killed by mole rats. And last on the raid team is Carl Everett, who's getting the hell out of here. Why did he want to leave the raid team? The next item are the August log entries. We learn that Carl has made some enemies. One of his enemies has put a bounty out on his head. Sal, an unscrupulous former gunner, has confronted Carl and threatened to turn Carl in for the bounty unless Carl pays her. She gives him 10 days to come up with the money before she turns him in. And so Carl frantically starts looking for work, but he's coming up with nothing. He says all of the short-term gigs are for mercs and gearheads. No one needs a fixer. Carl is a fixer. What's a fixer? Well, a fixer is a slang term for somebody who has good connections, typically connections with other criminals. A fixer uses his relationships with other people to put together jobs, gigs, teams like this treasure hunting team. Even though he has connections, nobody's hiring a fixer and he needs to come up with the money. On August 31st, Carl comes up with the idea of trying to get Sal interested in the treasure of Jamaica Plain. He says, "It's an old rumor, but if I spin it right, maybe I can convince Sal that I'm worth more than the price on my head." And we learned that it worked. He spun it well. She bought it. He managed to convince her that the treasures of Jamaica Plain were the greatest prize in the Commonwealth, the big score that no one's ever pulled off. She agrees not to turn him in for the bounty or to kill him herself, but instead she wants him to work as a fixer and put together a team. And so he calls in every favor he has, sending out the message we heard to Hadrian, sending out the message we heard to Ken and Tanya. In the final entry, we learn that he does believe there's something down there in Jamaica Plain, something big. He says the security sounds like it's insane. Turrets, robots, locks. But no one's ever gotten that far because they can't get past the ghouls. 200 years and no one's even come close. What surprises him though is despite all this security, none of the old papers really even mention it. All we hear about the treasures of Jamaica Plain are the billboards and the flyers, the marketing material that this town put out themselves. They're talking a lot about their own treasures, but no one else really is. Carl says that sounds fishy to him. He doesn't know why it's fishy, and he hopes that Sal doesn't find out until he is far away. The final entries on Carl's log are from October, and there are only two. The first is about Hadrian, the man in the life ring whom we found. He says that he hasn't gotten any word from Hadrian, but the others are all here. He says that Tanya, Ken's wife, is good for muscle and helps keep Ken in line, but in his final note, he's really upset. He says that Sal insists that he goes along, but Carl is just a fixer. He doesn't have any special skills in combat or picking locks. He just organizes people. He uses his connections. But Sal is still insisting that he goes along. Carl thinks it's because he knows too much. He thinks that once Sal gets the treasure, she's gonna gut all of them. He ends by saying that he doesn't think he's gonna get out of there alive. Well, he didn't. But not because Sal murdered him, but because he got overwhelmed by ghouls. Well, if they were a team, why are they so separated? It seems odd to me that they would go to all the trouble to organize this team, only to separate once they got attacked by ghouls. Of course, once they separated, the ghouls could pick them off one by one, which so far is what we've seen. But there were 2 more names on that list. Let's see if we can find them. Continuing down the road from this barricade, we find a large church with a red door.
Chained on the other side.
But the front door is chained from the other side. We need to find a way inside. Right next to this is a stairway leading up to a house. In the mailbox, we find a note that says, "Help Wanted." This Help Wanted note is advertising the Hallucinogen building. Remember, Hallucinogen was trying to find volunteers to be experimented on. I covered the Hallucinogen story in my video on the topic, which you can watch here. Heading on into the building, we find more feral ghouls, and we hear them walking around above us. Heading upstairs, we find them and we can kill them. But we hear more walking around. Where could they be? Well, there's a 3rd floor to this building. Heading up to the 3rd floor, we find it totally collapsed, but a small path has been made with plywood leading to the church. Killing the ghouls on our path, we can walk across the plywood to the roof of the church. Since I was in my jetpack, I was able to jump on up to the bell tower and head down that way. In this upper portion of the church, we find an open safe with some chems and loot inside, a duffel bag, and a tripwire connected to a short pipe rifle. After disarming them for the experience, we can head on down, and we see a cooking stove in the corner of this room. Sitting on a bench next to the cooking stove is Luke Silverhand, one of the final members of the treasure hunting team. Like all the others on his corpse, we find a Jamaica Plain flyer and also Silverhand's note. Luke Silverhand managed to find a manifest detailing the defenses of the vault securing the treasure of Jamaica Plain. He says that it was protected by a Type 5 laser defense grid. Practically military grade, he says. Whatever's down there, the security is the real deal. And then we learn that he has plans to betray his entire team. He says that it should be easy enough to let the others in, then reactivate the defense system and let the turrets do the rest. No need to get my hands dirty. But Luke never had the opportunity to betray his teammates. The ghouls got to him first. Near to his body, we can loot a stash of caps and then unchain the door from this side to open it. Now we just have to find Sal. And of course, the treasure. Near to the church, we find an abandoned supermarket. Inside are 2 charging police protectrons. This can be great news to those coming to Jamaica Plain at lower levels. Turning them into companions can be quite handy when attacked by all these ghouls. West of this point, we find a broken building with a workshop inside. Activating this workshop gives you access to this broken house as a settlement for your Miniman settlers. I've already completely built up this settlement. I'm pretty pleased with the final result. If you're interested, you can watch my Jamaica Plain settlement build by clicking here. But this is the edge of Jamaica Plain, so heading back east, we can open a Pulowski preservation shelter to loot a couple of Rad-X, and then the final building has a large rusted statue standing outside. Heading inside, there are 1 or 2 ghouls to dispatch. We can loot some of the containers and then take the steps upstairs. Upstairs, we turn left to walk through a northern door, and as we do, a ghoul climbs over an overturned desk. Behind this desk, we find the corpse of Sal. On her body is the Jamaica Plain mayor's password and Sal's holotape.
Damn it! Worthless bastards. Scattered like rad roaches the moment they saw their first ghoul. I've spent months prepping for this op. There's no way I'm backing out now. That treasure will be mine. Even if I have to dig it up with my own bare hands.
And that's why they all failed. They scattered as soon as they saw the ghouls, because each of them were in it for themselves. Tanya planned to betray Sal because she was jealous of Sal looking at her husband. According to Carl, Sal was planning to betray them all to keep the treasure for herself. Luke was planning to betray them all to turn the defense grid against them to keep the treasure for himself. The only 2 who didn't have any plans of treachery were Carl and Hadrian. Carl because he thought something sounded fishy about the treasure of Jamaica Plain. He just wanted to get get out of there, and Hadrian because he got killed before he could even make plans to join them. Had they simply stuck together, they might have survived. Here we can loot an end of dungeon steamer trunk, and then the police protectrons that I hacked got attacked by some ghouls. I hopped on down to defend them and noticed a picnic area just outside this building, with a large American flag erected outside. This is a harrowing scene. We find half a dozen skeletons out here, all sitting at these picnic tables. The tables are laid out with silverware and food. Looks like some large meal was going on here when the bombs dropped. Back inside and turning left, we can go through a broken wall to find what looks like the mayor's office. We see a wall safe with a red wire leading to a terminal on a desk. This was the mayor's terminal, and we can use the mayor's password that we found on Sal's body to activate it. On the terminal, we find the mayor's treasures exhibit speech. This exhibit was all about the treasures of this small community. The exhibit was about history, culture, memory, and as we suspected, they were planning on turning this into a time capsule. They're going to commit these memories to the earth so that future generations may look back and remember where they came from. There was an invocation by a pastor, then there was the sealing ceremony, sealing off the vault, and then a potluck dinner at the south lawn. This must be that large meal, the remains of which we just saw. The next note is called Budget Statement, and this tells us a little bit more about the financials of the town of Jamaica Plain, and we find a bit of a scandal. For the 2077 fiscal year, the town had $562 million in revenue, but their expenses were $574 million. Their expenses exceeded their revenue by well over $10 million. The scandalous part of this is that the biggest expense they have is salaries and benefits, nearly $300 million alone being dedicated to salaries and benefits. Everyone has to make a living, even governmental employees, but what constitutes a benefit? This is a small town. How many people shared $300 million as part of their salary or benefits? The salaries exceed the town's operating expenses by over $100 million. It's more expensive to pay the mayor and the other bureaucrats working for the town than to actually operate the town. But the thing that really pushed them over was the treasures exhibit. They spent nearly $40 million on the treasures exhibit, which is tiny compared to all of the others, but had they not spent that, they would have been cash flow positive. The town would have made around $20 million more than they spent. From this terminal, we can unlock the wall safe, which has some caps and some ammunition, and then we can use the Jamaica Plain Town Hall key to open the door leading down to the basement. But of course, this is unnecessary because the walls are broken. We can just walk around the wall. Heading downstairs, we find a door to the basement which we can unlock using the town hall key. Down the stairs to the basement, we arrive in a lobby area lit by a single hanging fluorescent light. There are two doors here. Going through the smaller broken brown wooden one leads to the maintenance room. This room has a bunch of consoles inside and one janitor's terminal. Inside the terminal, we learn that the electrics are on the fritz, the place is running on emergency mode only, that the HVAC is non-functional, which is why we see all of that flammable gas floating around down here, but the treasures exhibit is operating normally, only because it's stuck on reserve power. Here we find the janitor's facility logs, and these go back many months to July 2077. The janitor is glad to hear that the city council finally approved renovations to the basement. He is mainly concerned about fixing these leaky old pipes and maybe replacing the AC. It's interesting to note that they agreed to renovate the basement only now, and this poor janitor has had to fix leaking pipes and flaky air conditionings by himself, while the mayor and her staff pull in nearly $300 million each year in salaries and bonuses. But in the next note, we learn that at least these governmental employees appreciate the janitor. The janitor was called up to fix a light in the break room, only to have the entire staff standing there to celebrate his 25th anniversary working for the city. They had a cake for him and everything. He says, "It's hard to believe I've spent all these years down here in the basement." He is really glad the renovation is going to be done because it's going to make this place a whole lot nicer. But then things start to go downhill. All of the money that was supposed to go into the renovations of this building, the renovations that were so desperately needed to fix the leaky pipes, to fix the air conditioning, to fix the building's electric, have been diverted to the mayor's pet project, the ridiculous treasures thing, he says. The city ripped out his storage room and started laying in marble floors. He says, "This is the craziest thing I've ever seen. What's the mayor gonna keep down here? Gold bars?" And the next note, he says it's hard enough to keep the place running as it is. When the city got the first cold day of fall, the heating system completely shorted out. There were lots of complaints, but what's he supposed to do? The money that was supposed to go into renovations are now being used on this treasures exhibit. He says give it a month or two, and everyone will wish they'd spent some of that money on maintenance. This raises another scandal in light of the finances we read on the mayor's terminal. Only $38 million or so were slated for the treasures exhibit, but from this janitor's terminal we learn that money that was supposed to be spent on renovations, which I believe was found in the maintenance section, which was $75 million, was siphoned away and used instead for the treasures exhibit. If that's the case, then the mayor stole money from the city to spend on this pet project, making it even more expensive than what it was supposed to be, and leaving the city without the renovations that it paid for, that it allocated funds for. And after all of that, despite all the money they're spending on this project, they're still using this poor janitor to do most of the legwork. They had him set up the protectrons, then they had him set up what he calls a highfalutin laser security system. The damn thing near killed me, he says. They've taken over half the basement with this fool thing, but they can't be bothered to shore up the ceiling or fix the damn plumbing. He can't believe the council is going along with this. What a waste of taxpayer dollars. To make things worse, on October 18th, after the exhibit had already opened, it only got 3 visitors that day. The janitor was surprised there were that many. He thinks part of the reason may be that the security screenings are keeping everyone away. The mayor still tried to put a good face on things, but there's only so much she can do. The janitor says that the city's wasted so much money on this boondoggle, he'd be amazed if they don't impeach the mayor and her entire staff. But the janitor is not a political man. He's a simple man. He's gonna stay focused on keeping the pipes patched up and the tourists out of his office. The final note comes the day the bombs dropped, October 23rd, 2077. He says, I heard it. It's bad outside now, real bad. Kinda puts everything in perspective, don't it? There won't be a ceremony tonight. Mayor's probably already dead. I'm gonna close up the treasures, then try and get out of here. Still the damnedest thing I've ever seen, but maybe it'll mean something to someone. Someday. Now, we already know from elsewhere that the bombs dropped on October 23rd, 2077. They hit New York City and Pennsylvania at 9:42 a.m., and they hit Boston and Washington, D.C. at 9:47 a.m. Now, I said earlier that the bombs must have dropped after they had the ceremony, after they closed the vault, and while the potluck dinner was going on, because we found all those skeletons eating food outside at those picnic tables. But here the janitor says that there's not going to be any ceremony tonight. That would make sense because the bombs dropped in the morning. His plan was to go close up the exhibit and then to leave, which makes me wonder why so many people were sitting at picnic tables outside the mayor's office in Jamaica Plain eating a big dinner at 9:47 in the morning. It seems like an odd time. It's too late for breakfast, but too early for lunch. At any rate, back out of the janitor's room, we then open the large door with the giant wooden seal above it, which leads to a presentation hall. We see the lawn chairs still out there next to a podium and a microphone where the mayor was to give her speech just before closing the vault. But of course that never happened because before she could, the bombs dropped. Using the archives key, which we found on one of the bodies, we can open up a door to the left. We'll explore that in just a second. Instead, we'll turn around and go through the opposite door, where we finally see the security defenses.
Welcome to the Treasures of Jamaica Plain. The security system is active. Please present your identification.
Through a large door, we see dozens of laser tripwires. Now, there are a number of ways we can get through this. We could try to disarm them. Notice that we don't get any experience for disarming these tripwires. Bethesda didn't want people to use this opportunity as a way to farm experience. However, we do get fiber optics, crystal, and steel. This is a useful way to farm for those components. Alternatively, we can go to the nearby console where we find the Jamaica Plain janitor's ID card sitting right on top of the card swiper. Looting the card, we can swipe the ID card, and that turns off the laser grid.
Identification acknowledged. Welcome, Mayor. You are clear to proceed.
Some security. The ID card was sitting right here. But what happens if we don't turn it off? Well, at the very end of this hallway, there's a button we can press to reactivate the entire thing. Walking through trips the security and turns on all the turrets. 3 laser turrets begin to attack. Let's see. But if we have the archives key, which we do, we can skip this entire section by going through that room we unlocked earlier. This is the archives room. In this room, we can find another key to the archives room, chems lying on the ground, lots of containers to loot, and an expert locked safe. We can go through a broken wall, down a tunnel, through another broken wall that leads to the vault. I believe this can be easily explained by the notes we found on the janitor's terminal talking about how this basement needed renovations. We're going through a tunnel made from older brick. Clearly, this is an older part of the building, and instead of using the money to properly renovate this place, they spent it on the vault. So 200 years later, there are giant holes in the walls, and the ceiling is collapsing. The security door in the vault led to that room that had all of the laser tripwires. Here we can push the button to reactivate them, which closes the door, or push it again to deactivate them, which opens the door. Now, there are 2 Protectrons charging in Protectron charging docks, each connected to a terminal. We could hack these to activate the Protectrons, to then hack and turn into temporary companions, but because we have the Jamaica Plain Mayor's password, these Protectrons will not turn hostile. If we didn't have the Mayor's password, which we found on Sal's corpse, and if we failed to hack this terminal the first time, we would inadvertently activate these Protectrons, and we'd be forced to destroy them. Also notice the skeleton lying against the security door here. The newsboy cap lying beneath the skeleton, I believe, is supposed to tell us that this is the corpse of the janitor. Remember, the last thing he wrote is that he was going to close up this exhibit before trying to leave. It looks like he successfully closed the exhibit, but not before he succumbed to radiation and died. With the key in hand, we can activate this terminal to open the door. The door opens and a light flips on inside the hallway. Past the janitor's skeleton and into the room, we can press the big red button. Where's the gold? Where's the money? Where are the weapons? Where's the treasure? On a table directly before us, we find a note. The note says, "This is a holotape." It then goes on to describe the holotape technology, as if we might not know what this technology is. On top of this note was the holotape, The Treasures of Jamaica Plain.
Welcome to the Treasures of Jamaica Plain. Within the walls of this time capsule, you, our descendants, will find the items and mementos we treasured in the year 2077. To you, 200 years in the future, these relics may seem quaint, but we hope that they will remind you of our place in history and your own.
Worthless.
As we laid the foundation for the world in which you live, so you too will lay a foundation for future generations. May that future be bright. On behalf of all of us in 2077, we wish you well. This is Mayor Alyssa Park, speaking for the town of Jamaica Plain.
There never was any treasure. It was all a big marketing ploy. This town was running out of money. They were spending more money than they were getting. So they invented the Treasures of Jamaica Plain as a way to lure tourists. But it didn't work. We learned from the janitor that no one really came to the exhibit. It ended up being a huge waste of money. Instead of actual treasures, the treasures we find are little mementos that were important to this town. They thought that technology would advance over the next 200 years, and that by 2277 people might be interested to look back and see what kind of technology they had to suffer with in 2077. But of course, this is where technology stopped. For the next 200 years, everyone has been using the exact same technology that these people put in their time capsule. The holotapes, the terminals. Nothing has advanced. And so this time capsule isn't any more interesting to us than any of the ruined abandoned houses we've found in the Commonwealth. We find another holotape here that shows off the inventory of this exhibit, and look at number 6, Anchorage Veterans Flag, donated to the exhibit by Private McKinney. This is none other than the same Private McKinney whom we meet in the Operation Anchorage simulation. I recently published a video showing off that battle, where we got to meet the private, and apparently he was a real person. He wasn't just a nameless soldier invented for the simulation, he was real.
Got him. McKinney! Jesus! You got a death wish? He's up on that ridge, right over there. Fuck! Damn it, McKinney! We've got to take out that goddamn sniper. We're pinned in here,
And after he died, his family donated the flag that the military gave him during his funeral, the flag that was draped on his casket, to this exhibit at Jamaica Plain. If you want to meet Private McKinney, you can check out my video on Operation Anchorage by clicking here. We also learned that the 2 American flags on display here were gifted by Colonel Nelson. Nelson pops up a number of times in Fallout 4. He was the guy working with Hallucinogen to create crowd control weaponry. And he was the guy who worked with the Wilson Atomatoys Company on the Scythe project, which made munitions for the military, specifically landmines. Looks like he must have lived in Jamaica Plain. And here's my favorite tidbit. We finally learned the brand name of all of these cigars we find. Ham Dulce cigars. We know that Kellogg's favorite cigar is the San Francisco Sunlight. We find a few of them, but most of the cigars we find are not San Francisco Sunlights. Sunlights have the yellow band. Most of the cigars have a blue band. Well, looks like the brand name of these cigars is Ham Dulce. The exhibit had gifts from Robco, gifts from the Boston Bugle. We find lab equipment from Dr. Damien Hansen, which was a gift from Hallucinogen. There must have been a lot of employees that worked at Hallucinogen that lived here in Jamaica Plain. We also find donations of surgical equipment and first aid kits from Milton General Hospital, clothing from Fallon's, and we learn the names of 2 pre-war businesses, a landscaping company called Burnett & Associates and a jewelry company called D. Miller & Sons. The jewelry company must have been responsible for things like lockets and pocket watches that we find throughout the wasteland. Now, there's only really one important loot item in here. In one of the display cases, we find the 2076 World Series baseball bat. It's a legendary weapon that has a chance to send targets flying. It has a distinct model with a unique wrap and a logo. I gave this to Kate early on in my game. It seemed like a great fit. She ran around knocking people into the sky with this baseball bat.
Gonna splatter your brain!
Now, I looted all of the baseball paraphernalia in this display because we know of a certain baseball freak who operates a shop in Diamond City. Heading back to Diamond City, I wanted to talk with him to see if he had anything interesting to say. Looks like he's not interested in the ball or the glove, he's only interested in the baseball bat, because sure enough, with the bat in my inventory, I found a dialogue option to talk with him about it.
I have this 2076 World Series baseball bat. Interested?
What? Oh, that's an original. Oh, look at that paint. I'll give you 200 caps for it. On the spot.
So I take it this bat is valuable.
Now, let me be clear. I want it. You bet your socks I do, but I'm a collector. Anyone else, that bat's just a piece of wood. You'll want her to be in the hands of someone who appreciates what she means to history, don't you? What do you say?
We can barter him up to 400 and sell it to him. If we do, he's very grateful.
You got a deal.
Here's your caps. And thank you. Thank you.
But once we sell it to him, it's gone from the world forever. If we take a look at his inventory, he doesn't have it available, which means we can't buy it back. I think it's great that Bethesda thought enough about this event to give us the option to sell the bat, but it doesn't make any sense to sell this bat. It's a unique weapon, it's the only weapon in the game that allows you to knock somebody into the sky, and it's a lot of fun to give to companions even if you don't use melee, just to watch them use the effect. Would be a shame to sell it to Mo and lose it forever. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is the full story of Jamaica Plain, home to a secret time capsule that has not seen the light of day for 200 years, that has taunted treasure hunters, leading them to their doom. A treasure that has seduced people, inflaming their own greed, leading to treachery and death. But a treasure that was only important to the people who buried it. A treasure with no real value at all. What are your thoughts on the treasure of Jamaica Plain? Were you disappointed when you opened those vault doors only to find a baseball bat? Or did you think it was fitting? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I read all of your comments and I use your comments as inspiration for my future videos. I publish a new video 6 days a week on a wide range of Fallout topics. So if you want to make sure that you don't miss tomorrow's video, be sure to subscribe and to click that bell notification button. I've got a t-shirt shop, folks. That's right, if you would like to wear an Oxhorn or Fallout-inspired t-shirt, check out my shop. I link to it in the description below. And if you like what I do and you want to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon. Patreon subscribers gain access to a private channel on my Discord server, as well as a bunch of other cool Oxhorn perks. But more than anything, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just so glad you're here watching this video with me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow morning, bright and early, with a brand new video.
On Hickory!
Don't walk outside the wall undefended. High quality protection for sale.
Shop in safety. No sense allowed at the surplus.